Hello and welcome. In this video I'm going to go in depth with the concept of coping in relation to men who are either unsuccessful or unsatisfied with their dating lives at the moment. So obviously we have our 4 ideologies in regard to attracting women here, and I'm going to go in depth about how each of them copes to varying degrees. And I have a video explaining these 3, so if you want to check that out, the link will be in the description. And I've also thrown in MGTOW as well, because we're talking about coping. Can't talk about cope without talking about MGTOW. So to get this started, what is coping? I'll describe coping as the way you react to something bad happen to you. And when something bad happens, you have 2 options. You can either look at reality, or you can choose a different path, which means you cope. So reality will be like some form of uncomfortable truth, it will be harsh, some shocking realization, and you accept responsibility for it. And people will usually choose to ignore this. Meanwhile, coping will be like some form of comforting lie. It's hopeful, it's emotionally pleasant, and it avoids blame and responsibility. So when something bad happens to anyone, people will usually like shy away from accepting reality because it's emotionally unpleasing, and then they will choose to cope instead. So just like a couple of examples, let's say that somebody applied for a job interview and he didn't get a job. The cope would be, oh, I didn't like the company anyway, yeah, it's their loss for not hiring me. Or, oh, my resume must have got lost, they didn't get my emails, or I must have just got overlooked. Something must have happened why I didn't get accepted, other than the fact, which reality would have been, is just I wasn't good enough for the job. I didn't have the skills or the talent or the intelligence. There were other people that were better than me. And people will usually choose to use these reasons over these reasons for when something bad happens to them. And another example, so let's say if somebody lost a football game, the cope would be like, oh, the referee was biased, yeah, he was on their side, like he was giving them every decision. Or they would say, oh yeah, they just got lucky, they got a really lucky goal, they got a deflection, something like that. And they would choose to believe these copes instead of the reality, which is they were simply better than us. We lack the skills, the talent to beat them in that football game. And just to tie it in with dating, because that is like the main focus on the video, if a guy gets rejected by a girl, the cope will be something like, oh, I'm just not her type, I'm sure I'll find the right girl one day. Or, oh, women aren't worth it anyway, yeah, dating is a waste of time, it's too much resources, effort and time that needs to go into attracting women, it's not worth it. But the reality is, if a guy got rejected, is that he probably just got rejected because he's unattractive. So pretty much I'll describe coping as the way you react to distress. So you have 2 options pretty much. You can either accept the truth, which is going to be harsh and people don't want to accept this, or you can choose to ignore reality. And this concept is coping. And there is like one more like side note, which is you can distort reality. So sometimes when the truth is staring you so blindly in the face that you kind of have to accept it, that you almost have to like distort reality, which is why people turn to things like alcohol and drugs to like get away from the like harsh truths that they're faced with when something bad happens to them. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to be looking at this, the mindsets that like people change, the reasoning for failures in their life. We're not going to be looking at this at the moment in time. That's for another video. So how do people cope? Well, according to this thing called attribution theory, there are 2 main ways that people cope. The first thing to look at is how people look at the blame. So what is responsible for the cause of failure? So there's either internal blame or external blame. So internal blame will be, oh, it's myself, I am responsible, it was my own fault for my own failure. Or there's external blame, which means some form of other factor or people or like something happened that is reason to blame. And people will usually, when they're coping, look to explain it with these kind of reasons, because it avoids responsibility. People don't want to have to blame themselves when something bad happens to them, so they will use these reasons instead. The way people mainly cope is they look at the consistency of the failure. So, and the failures can either be permanent or temporary. So a permanent thing will be that things not likely to change, that things are the way they are at the moment and they're going to stay that way forever. Temporary will mean that things are likely to change. So the main takeaway from this is that people will usually, when explaining failures, will look at this because it provides hope. So things might be bad now, I might have failed this time, but it's only a temporary thing, that things will get better in time later on. So if we go back to an example, the person who didn't get hired from a company, the external and temporary reasoning for why he didn't get the job would be, my application must have went missing. I was just really unlucky this time. Something must have happened. They didn't get my emails. Like, there must have just been some slip up. And this does two things. So anything in this corner is going to be the biggest form of cope, because it's avoiding any responsibility. You're saying that it had nothing to do with you, and you're also saying that there is hope. So you might have failed this year, that your application went missing this year when you applied, but next year when you apply again, then you'll get the job, be successful next time. So any reasoning that falls into this corner is going to be the biggest form of cope. Moving over to external permanent reasoning, people say something like, oh, I didn't like the company anyway. Yeah, it's their loss for not hiring me. So in this case, they are accepting that things aren't going to change. They are accepting that the job wasn't for them, that they're not going to be working there. However, they are still externalizing the blame. So they're blaming the company, they're blaming other factors, the interview system, like whatever it is. They're not like taking the blame to themselves. It's not their fault. And now moving over to this corner. So this is going to be your internal and temporary reasoning for why you failed. So in this case, you are accepting that it is your fault. You're accepting responsibility for it, for your failure. However, you're also saying that things are going to change. There is hope. So you just need to work harder for next time. So you didn't get the job this year because you didn't put enough hours, time or effort. But next year, when you go to apply again, you'll be more intelligent, you'll have more skills, and next time you'll be able to get the job. So this is like implying that there's hope, and it's implying that you're in control of your future and your destiny. So pretty much all of these things can be described as cope. But the reality is, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but a lot of cases, that people will never or rarely ever acknowledge this corner here, because this is the like worst case scenario of all of them, which is I didn't get the job because I lack the talent. I will never have the skills, and people will never want to face this reality, even though it so often is a reality and the explanation of your failures, because does two things. It's admitting that there is no hope, that you're never going to change, and that you are also the sole reason of blame. And this is the hardest one that people will want to acknowledge. So people will usually advocate for selecting these kind of things, copes, instead. So just going back to our team that lost a football game example, our external temporary cope would be, oh, the other team just got lucky. They got a winner in the last minute of time, or oh, one of their goals was a deflection and that's why they won. Our external permanent would have been, oh yeah, the referee was on their side. How on earth are we supposed to beat them when every decision goes their way? Or another one would be like, oh, football's just not my game. But if it was like basketball or rugby, then we would have beaten them. Like, so we're just not good at football, like, so we avoid playing that. Internal temporary would be, oh, we just need to work harder. They beat us this time round, but once we put in the hours, we put in the work, we put in the training, then next time in the season, then we'll come back around to beat them. Internal permanent, and this is the one that people will never or rarely ever acknowledge, is that we lost the game because we lack the talent and we will never be better than them, and it is our fault for losing the game. So just as a general rule for copes, and you can apply this to any bad situation that happens in your life, anything in this corner will be blaming your failures down to luck. Anything in this corner will be like blaming the institutions, that the game was rigged from the beginning, that we never had a chance and things aren't going to change. Anything in this corner will be because we lost because of a lack of hard work, that if we put in the hours, we put in the training, then we'll eventually overcome those challenges and we'll be successful. So all of these three are copes, and then the one that people will rarely ever acknowledge or realise, and is so often the reality of your failures, is blaming your genetics and your talent, because that's implying that things are as they are and they're never going to change, and you are solely responsible for the failure. So now we're going to look at the three copes that people use with dating, and I've selected the four ideologies here. Obviously we've got the Bluepill, Redpill, Blackpill, and I've also included MGTOW. And just pause the video now if you want to try and figure it out for yourself, where you feel each of these ideologies will fit into each of these boxes. And if you've not heard of these terms before and you're new to this subject matter, then I do have a video going in depth of these three ideologies, the Bluepill, Redpill, Blackpill. A link will be in the description below. And I've also thrown in MGTOW, and if you've not heard of MGTOW before, it's basically a group of men who have abstained from the dating market altogether because they believe that the system is rigged in the way that the laws regarding marriage, child custody, etc., paternity, are so stacked against men that there is no point in partaking in dating or relationships any further. So, starting with this corner, somebody who blames external factors and is still hopeful that things are going to change. This, in my opinion, will be your blue pill. This is where you'll hear phrases such as, "There's a girl out there for everyone. She just hasn't turned up in my life yet. When I stop trying, the right girl will appear. I just haven't found the right girl yet." Or, "There's plenty of fish in the sea." So all of these phrases are saying that you've just got really unlucky this whole time, that the world is against you, you are not to blame in any way, shape or form, that you've just been really unlucky. And it's also hopeful at the same time, because your girlfriend-to-be could be waiting right around the corner for you. She's just not turned up to your life yet. And this is why you see so many blue-pilled men, because it's the most comforting thing to believe, because it both removes any responsibility that you have to do with it, and it also says that there is hope. And this is why the blue pill is still the most dominant ideology. So moving over to external permanent, this will be your MGTOW. So MGTOWs will accept that the game is rigged and things are not going to change, so they know that there's no hope. However, they are still externalising the blame. So they will argue things like, oh yeah, the custody, marriage, paternity laws are unfair, that the odds are stacked heavily against men, and that there's a huge financial cost of divorce. And there might be some truth to these arguments. However, the reason why I think it's cope is because nobody's forcing you to do any of these things. Like, if you're so concerned with things like marriage or divorce, whatever, then just don't get married. Simple as that. No one's forcing you to get married to women. Same goes with like child custody or paternity. If you're worried about the laws regarding kids, then just don't have kids. Get a vasectomy. Get male sterilisation. You don't need to have kids. The reason why MGTOW is cope is because they pretend that they're slamming the door shut on all of the women queuing up outside their house, waiting desperately so they can get this high quality MGTOW man. When the truth is, MGTOWs have no options, they are of poor genetic quality, and then they use these reasons to disguise from the fact that they are unwanted and rejected by women. And it's nothing more than just cope. So I really despise the MGTOW movement. It is very much cope. It's almost as much of a cope as the blue pill. So moving over to internal temporary. So this will be our red pill. So they will accept that they are responsible, that they are to blame, it's their fault. However, they are also hopeful that things are likely to change and that the power is in their hands. And you'll hear these phrases such as, "I just need to. And then I'll be able to turn my life around. So I just need to get better game and then women will like me. I just need to get ripped at the gym. I just need to work harder and earn more money, and then women will be chasing after me. They'll love me." And I want to make myself clear on this point. The red pill isn't always cope. Like, these things do work, and they can help you ascend. But only if, like, you have a somewhat decent level of genetic quality in the first place. Getting ripped at the gym is not going to help you if you're sub 5'6". In fact, that will only make things worse for you because you'll end up coming like a manlet. However, if you are like an average tier man, like maybe a 6 out of 10 looks wise, if you do these things such as learn game, going to the gym and earning more money, then you will become more attractive and you will likely be able to ascend. However, it's not going to work if you're sub 5 in the face. And there is one more caveat for internal temporary reasoning, and that will be our blue-pilled simps. So they will say things like, "Oh, I just need to show her how much I care. I need to show her how much I love her. I just need to be available for her all the time, pick her up from work, respond to all of her messages immediately, send her flowers, send her gift cards, and then she will see the real value in me, and then she will see how much of a real man that I actually am." So again, they are admitting that they are responsible, but they still believe that the power is in their hands, and if they just keep working harder to show how much of a good man they are, then things will change, and the women will become attracted to him. So all of these are copes to varying degrees. And now moving on to the last corner, which is going to be the black pill. So the black pill is the only ideology that both accepts things are going to be permanent, that there is no hope, there is no point in trying, and things aren't going to change, and it also internalises the blame. So it is because of my inferior genetics is the main reason that I got rejected. It's because I am ugly, it is because I'm short, it is because of my race or any other thing to do with my genes. So they're accepting both responsibility and hopelessness. So it's the only ideology that isn't cope. And I want to make myself very clear on this next point. And this is probably the biggest misconception with the black pill. The black pill is often chalked off as cope by the red pill because they will say that black pillars will externalise the blame by blaming women for their lack of dating success. But I want to make myself very clear that women are not to blame for those struggling with dating because, quite frankly, they are only making the most rational and logical decisions available to them, given the current market conditions. Like, if you're a woman, Why wouldn't you be hypergamous? Why wouldn't you try to date the best looking guys if you have the options for them? Why would you settle for someone of poor genetic quality? Like, it's common sense. Women at the moment are doing exactly what we would expect them to do given the current dating environment. So women are not to blame. And this is where I'm going to come to my last point. So there is one more form of cope, a little gap that I've left here, which is external blame and permanent. And this will be our black-pilled normies. And this is what the red pill is talking about when they say that the black pill is cope. Because they will argue things like, oh, anyone who is black-pilled, they're just too lazy. They just don't want to learn game. They just don't want to put in the hours, put in the work, risk getting rejected by doing approaches. And to be honest, there is some truth to that. Because one of the worst things about the black pill is that there are a lot of guys who get black-pilled when they have no need to be. And there are so many examples, just take a look around, of men who have done these things and that they have ascended through a means of going to the gym and improving on themselves. But where this argument doesn't hold up is that there is a difference between men who are like average, like your normie tier, and men who have a right to not use the black pill as cope and give up because they are so genetically inferior. And there are only 3 things that are at least 95% genetic. Those are your height, your facial bones, and your race. So the only people that have a right to be black-pilled and it not be cope, I would say, are sub-5s, men who are below 5'6" in height, or if you're ethnic, or anyone who's like a combination of those things. Anyone else who's not those things that I just described can ascend through a means of learning game, going to the gym, working on themselves. And anyone who doesn't do those things is coping by definition, because they're externalizing the blame and accepting that things are hopeless and permanent when there clearly would be hope if they did put the required amount of work. And that is why we see such a great divide between black-pilled normies and black-pilled sub-5s, because there is like a huge disparity. Normies have like the hope to be able to ascend, while if you're sub-5, then there is no hope. No matter how much work you put in, it's not going to make a difference. And in fact, it will only end up making things worse, as I've already stated. So I hope that last point makes sense. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with it or not. Do you think that normies have a right to be black-pilled? Or do you think that the black pill should be specifically for men who are so genetically inferior, like, you know, your true selves? I'm going to make one more point. The way I see it is that you should be aware of the black pill, that you should be aware that things are significantly harder than they were 40 years ago, that it is becoming exponentially more difficult as a normie to try to ascend and put in the work to be able to attract women. But that is still not a justifiable reason to give up hope altogether. And because of that, you should be aware of the black pill and its implications, but you shouldn't let it guide your behaviour. So your behaviour should be inherently red-pilled. So you should try to do as many of these things as possible and try to work on yourself as much as you can in order to being with a chance of ascending. So that's what I think. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me on that last point. And obviously I've covered quite a lot of topics in the last couple of weeks, so let me know in the comments below if you have any suggestions or any other subjects that you want me to go over.